You think you know who's watching, but you don't. Not yet. Sophia's hands trembled as she wiped down the counter. She had just served a man one who she thought was just another customer. But as she caught his eye, she felt a weight in the air, a feeling she couldn't shake. Was he really just a regular diner guest? Or was something much bigger at play here? And the real twist? The man wasn't just any diner customer. He held the key to everything she was about to lose. Sophia wasn't looking for trouble. She never had been. She wasn't the kind of person who made waves or picked fights. She believed in showing up, doing her job, and treating people with kindness. That was how she had been raised. Simple principles. Work hard. Respect others. And keep your head down when things got messy. But sometimes, doing the right thing had consequences. And she was about to learn that the hard way. For almost 3 years, Sunrise Diner had been her second home. It wasn't fancy, just a local diner on the east side of Springfield, tucked between a gas station and a laundromat. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee. Where families came for Sunday breakfast. Where the waitstaff learned your order before they learned your name. The hours were long. The pay wasn't great. And the management barely cared. But Sophia stuck with it. She had bills to pay. Her rent was already too high for a one-bedroom. And her younger brother, Liam, was in his second year of college. He didn't know she helped cover his textbooks and groceries when their mom couldn't. She never told him. Just sent a little extra when she could. That was why she took the double shifts. Why she put up with customers who barely looked her in the eye. Why she tolerated coworkers who acted like kindness was a weakness. She had seen things here that made her stomach turn. The way Emma, a senior waitress, treated some customers like they didn't exist while she laughed and flirted with others. How Alex, a newer server, avoided certain tables altogether. How the whole energy of the restaurant changed depending on who walked through the doors. It wasn't just about money. A well-dressed businessman would get smiles and conversation, while a working-class customer in a paint-stained uniform got rushed service. And if someone looked like they might not tip well? Some of the staff wouldn't even try. Sophia hated it. But calling it out wasn't an option. She had learned that the hard way. A few months back, she made a comment, just a casual remark, about how a table had been waiting too long while Emma leaned by the counter, scrolling through her phone. Emma had looked her dead in the eye and said, "You don't get paid extra for being a saint, Sophia." That was how it was. Either you went along with it, or you learned to keep your mouth shut. Sophia had chosen the latter. Until that night. And after that night? Nothing would ever be the same again. It was a slow Wednesday evening. The dinner rush had come and gone. And Sophia was at the counter, refilling the sugar dispensers, when the bell above the door jingled. An older man walked in. His clothes were clean but slightly worn. Nothing flashy, just a simple button-up and slacks. He carried himself with quiet confidence. But there was something in his posture. A brief hesitation as he scanned the room before stepping forward. Sophia recognized that look. She had seen it before. Especially in customers who already knew what kind of welcome they were or weren't about to get. Sure enough, the response was immediate. Emma, leaning against the counter, didn't even look up from her phone. Alex, who had been joking with another server near the drink station, glanced toward the door, made eye contact with the man for a split second. And then went right back to his conversation. No greeting. No welcome to Sunrise Diner. Just silence. Sophia felt the weight of it, thick and uncomfortable. This wasn't an accident. Her coworkers had made a choice. For a second, she considered keeping her head down. Staying out of it. It would be easier. It always was. But then she glanced at the man again. The way he stood there, waiting. Like he was giving them a chance to prove him wrong. Just this once. So Sophia made a choice, too. She wiped her hands on a napkin, grabbed a menu, and walked straight over. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice warm but casual. "Just you tonight?" The man met her eyes. And something in his expression softened. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. Sophia smiled and gestured toward an open booth near the window. "Follow me." "Is the booth okay?" "Perfectly fine," he said as he settled in. She handed him a menu and pulled a pen from behind her ear. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee," he said. "Black." "Coming right up." Sophia moved quickly to grab a fresh pot and pour his cup herself. She could feel Emma's eyes on her. Feel Alex watching too. But she didn't turn around. As she set the coffee down in front of him, he glanced around the restaurant. Then back at her. "You the only one working tonight?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Sophia knew what he meant. She flicked her gaze toward the others, where Emma was now whispering something to Alex, both of them barely even trying to hide their smirks. "Feels like it sometimes," she said. That made him chuckle. He flipped open the menu and scanned the options. "What's good here?" Sophia tilted her head, thinking. "Depends on what you're in the mood for. If you're looking for something solid, the pot roast is made fresh. But if you want my personal favorite, the grilled salmon's the way to go." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" She nodded. "Promise you won't regret it." He smiled, small, but genuine. "Salmon it is." Sophia jotted it down. "Great choice." As she walked back to the kitchen, she heard Emma mutter, just loud enough to be heard. "She's wasting her time." Sophia clenched her jaw but kept walking. By the time she placed the order and returned with a fresh coffee refill, she could feel the shift in the air. It was subtle, but it was there. The way Emma's eyes narrowed. The way Alex kept glancing toward the booth, like he was waiting for Sophia to slip up. Even Mark, the manager, had peeked out from his office, scanning the room before disappearing again. Sophia had the sinking feeling that she had just put a target on her back. But she wouldn't know how bad it was. Until the next morning. Sophia had barely slept. Something about the way Emma had muttered under her breath. The way Alex had smirked. And the way Mark had peeked out of his office. It gave her a bad feeling. But she told herself she was overthinking. She had done nothing wrong. If anything, she had done exactly what a waitress was supposed to do. Serve customers. So why did her stomach twist as she pulled into the Sunrise Diner parking lot the next morning? The air was crisp. The sun barely peeked over the buildings as she grabbed her apron from the passenger seat and slung it over her shoulder. A couple of cars were already in the lot, including Mark's. Sophia stepped inside, expecting the usual. Emma and Alex standing around, chatting. The kitchen crew prepping for the morning shift. The radio humming low in the background. But something was off. Emma wasn't leaning against the counter like she usually did. Alex wasn't making coffee or cracking jokes with the line cooks. Instead, both of them were watching her. Emma had a sly little smile. Alex had his arms crossed. And neither of them said a word. Sophia's grip tightened on her apron. Then, the sound of a door creaking open. Mark. He stood in the doorway of his office, looking at her like he had been waiting for her to walk through that door. "Sophia," he said flatly. "Come with me." A cold pit settled in her stomach. "What's this about?" Mark didn't answer. He just turned and walked back into his office. Sophia swallowed hard. She could feel Emma and Alex still watching her as she made her way to the back. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The office was cramped. The desk covered in paperwork and old coffee stains. A file sat open in front of Mark, but he wasn't looking at it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, let out a slow breath, and said, "We're letting you go." The words hit like a slap. Sophia blinked. Her mind scrambled to make sense of what she had just heard. What? Mark's expression didn't change. It's not working out. Her heart pounded. Not working out? She let out a sharp laugh, one that had no humor in it. I've been here almost 3 years. I've never missed a shift. Never been late. Mark exhaled through his nose like he was already tired of the conversation. It's a decision we've made. We? Sophia knew what that meant. Her throat tightened. This is because of last night, isn't it? Mark didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Sophia felt heat rise to her face. So I get fired for doing my job? Mark's fingers tapped against the desk. You can collect your final paycheck next week. That was it. No warning. No explanation. Just out. Sophia clenched her fists, but she knew there was no point in arguing. She untied her apron and set it on the chair. As she turned to leave, she hesitated at the door, forcing herself to look back at Mark. You know this isn't right, she said, her voice steady. Mark didn't even flinch. Sophia shook her head and walked out. Emma was still standing near the counter when she stepped back into the main dining area, a knowing smirk on her face. Alex was pretending to wipe down a table, but he wasn't even trying to hide the look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had been waiting for this moment. Sophia felt her face burn. Not with embarrassment, but with anger. She wanted to say something. Wanted to call them out. Make a scene. Demand to know how they could be so heartless. But she didn't. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She lifted her chin. Walked past them without a word. And pushed through the doors into the cold morning air. For the first time in 3 years. She had no job. No paycheck. No backup plan. She got into her car. Slammed the door shut. And gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. How was she going to pay rent? How was she going to help Liam with his groceries? How was she? Her phone buzzed. Sophia ignored it at first, staring blankly at the windshield. Her thoughts spiraled. Then, she glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She hesitated. Then, with a shaking hand. Hello? A deep voice came through the line. Steady. Familiar. Sophia, this is Daniel Carter. Sophia frowned. I'm sorry, who? The man you served last night at Sunrise Diner. Her breath caught. Oh. Yes, sir. How can I help you? There was a pause. Then Daniel said. I heard what happened. Sophia's stomach twisted. Of course, he had. News traveled fast in places like Sunrise Diner. Yeah, well, she said, forcing out a bitter laugh, I guess I should have just ignored you like everyone else. Daniel's next words made her freeze. That's exactly why I'm calling. Sophia's grip on the phone tightened. She had no idea why Daniel Carter, just another customer, or so she thought, was calling her the morning after she had been fired. Her heart pounded as she sat up straighter in the driver's seat. I'm sorry. What do you mean? There was a pause on the other end. Then Daniel's voice came through. Steady. Deliberate. I wasn't just there for dinner last night, Sophia. She frowned. I was there to see how my employees treat people. Sophia blinked. Your employees? I own Sunrise Diner, Daniel said simply. For a moment, the words didn't even register. She sat frozen. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and shock. I'm sorry, what? You heard me, he said. I own this place. Sophia pressed her fingers to her temple. So you're telling me you own this place? And last night, you were what, checking in? More or less, Daniel said. I make it a habit to visit my restaurants unannounced. No formal inspections. No warning. I come in as just another customer. That's how you learn the truth about how a business is being run. Sophia's chest felt tight. And what did you learn? She asked. Daniel sighed. That I have a serious problem with my staff. Sophia let out a humorless laugh. Yeah. No kidding. There was another pause. Then Daniel asked. How long have you worked there? Almost 3 years, she said. 3 years. And I've never missed a shift. Never been late. I keep my head down, do my job, and treat people like human beings. She exhaled. Frustration crept into her voice. But apparently, that was enough to get me fired. That's exactly why I'm calling, Daniel said. Sophia furrowed her brows. I don't understand. Daniel was quiet for a moment before he spoke again. I let them fire you on purpose. Her stomach dropped. You, what? I needed to see what they would do, Daniel explained. I wanted to know if this was just about bad service or if it was something deeper. And now, I have my answer. Sophia shook her head. So you let them throw me out, just to prove a point? I know it wasn't fair, Daniel admitted. But now, I know exactly who I can't trust to run my business the way it should be run. Sophia felt her pulse thumping in her ears. And what does that mean for me? There was a shift in Daniel's tone. Something firm. Almost authoritative. It means I need someone I can trust, he said. I need someone who actually understands what it means to run a restaurant fairly. Someone who doesn't pick and choose who gets treated with dignity based on their own prejudices. Sophia frowned. I still don't see what this has to do with me. Daniel's next words stopped her cold. I want you to come back, he said. As the new manager. Sophia's breath caught. Her brain scrambled to process what she had just heard. What? You heard me, Daniel said. I fired your manager this morning. Mark's done. Sophia's mouth fell open. Emma and Alex were going to lose their minds. Daniel continued. I know this is sudden, but I'm not interested in anyone else taking over. You understand what matters in a workplace. You know how people should be treated. That's exactly what Sunrise Diner needs. Sophia swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can, Daniel said firmly. And you should. She stared out the windshield, her mind spinning. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been tossed aside like she didn't matter. And now? Now she was being offered the very position of the man who had fired her. She took a slow breath. What do you say? Daniel asked. Sophia hesitated. She could still hear Emma's mocking voice. Alex's smug silence. Mark's dismissive tone. They had counted her out. Thought they had gotten rid of her for good. But now. Now she had a chance to be the change they never saw coming. Sophia lifted her chin, gripping the phone a little tighter. I'll do it, she said. Daniel let out a satisfied breath. Good. Come in tomorrow morning. You start at 8. Sophia nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I'll be there. As she hung up, she sat in stunned silence for a moment, gripping the wheel as the reality of it all sank in. Less than a day ago, she had walked out of Sunrise Diner with nothing. Tomorrow, she would be walking back in as the boss. And she wasn't coming to play nice. Sophia stood outside Sunrise Diner, gripping the strap of her bag. The morning air was sharp, the kind that cut right through your clothes. But she barely felt it. She had spent all night thinking about this moment. Yesterday, she had walked out of this building with nothing. No job. No explanation. No respect. Today, she was stepping back in with the one thing Emma, Alex, and Mark had never imagined she would have. Power. She inhaled deeply. squared her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The scent of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, just like it always had. Customers were scattered across the booths, forks clinking against plates, the low hum of conversation blending with the radio playing in the background. At first, nobody noticed her. Then Emma turned from the counter, saw her, and froze. Alex, who had been laughing with a busboy, caught sight of her too. His mouth snapped shut mid-sentence. A flicker of something crossed his face. Confusion. Unease. It was almost too perfect. Sophia let the moment stretch just long enough for them to squirm. Then, she walked toward the counter. Set her bag down with purpose. Emma recovered first. She scoffed, crossing her arms. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sophia tilted her head. "You'll find out soon enough." Emma's smirk faltered. Before she could say anything else, a door opened at the back of the restaurant. Mark stepped out from the office, already looking irritated, flipping through a stack of papers. "Emma, I need you to." Then he saw her. His whole body went rigid. His eyes flicked to Emma, then to Alex. Like he was trying to piece together what was happening. "Sophia," he said slowly. "You don't work here anymore." Sophia smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "Actually," she said, "I do." Mark blinked. "What?" Another voice cut in before she could answer. "I believe I can clarify that." Every head in the room turned. Daniel Carter walked in. Calm. Collected. His hands in the pockets of his tailored coat. He scanned the room, taking his time. Then, his eyes landed on Mark. Emma's face paled. Alex looked like he wished he could disappear. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. Daniel stopped beside Sophia. Turned to face the staff. His voice was steady. Measured. But it carried authority. "As of this morning, Sunrise Diner has undergone some management changes," he said. "Effective immediately, Mark, your position is terminated." Emma gasped. Alex looked like he had been punched in the gut. Mark's face turned an ugly shade of red. "Wait a damn minute." Daniel cut him off. "I've already heard enough from you." Mark's mouth snapped shut. Sophia almost felt bad. Almost. Daniel turned toward the rest of the staff. "Some of you may be wondering what's going on. Let me make it simple." He let the words sink in. "Last night, I visited this restaurant as a regular customer." Silence. And what I witnessed was unacceptable. Nobody dared to speak. Daniel gestured toward Sophia. "This woman was the only employee who treated me with respect. The only one who did her job the way it should be done." He turned back to the staff. His expression hardened. "The rest of you? Some of you ignored me completely. Some of you made it clear you had no interest in serving certain customers at all." His voice sharpened. "That ends today." The silence in the restaurant was thick. Then Daniel turned back to Sophia. "Sophia is your new manager." Emma's mouth fell open. Alex's jaw clenched. The busboy standing near the kitchen looked like he wanted to clap. Sophia finally let herself smile. She turned toward Emma and Alex, who were still stunned silent, and leaned against the counter. "Well," she said lightly. "This is awkward." Emma's expression twisted. "You." She turned to Daniel, her voice sharp. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Daniel said. "You don't like it? You're free to leave." Emma snapped her mouth shut. Her nostrils flared. She wasn't stupid. She knew walking out meant losing her paycheck. And Emma wasn't about to do that. Alex, on the other hand, wasn't as smart. "This is bull." Daniel cut him off. "You're welcome to quit as well." Alex froze. His mouth opened. Then closed. Like he was doing the math in his head. Emma glared daggers at Sophia. But Sophia just smiled back. "Looks like we all have a lot of adjusting to do," she said. Her voice was light. But firm. "So let's get to work." She watched as Emma stormed toward the coffee machine, mumbling under her breath. Alex grabbed a rag and started wiping down a table, his movements stiff with anger. Daniel gave Sophia a knowing look. "I have a feeling you'll do just fine here." Sophia exhaled, watching as the restaurant settled into a new reality. One where she was in charge. And for the first time since she walked into this building 3 years ago, she felt something she hadn't before. Respect. Sophia stood behind the counter, gripping the clipboard in her hands. The reality of her new position was still sinking in. She was the manager now. This was her diner to run. But power wasn't just given, it had to be earned. She could feel the eyes on her. Emma, watching with thinly veiled resentment. Alex, sulking as he half-heartedly wiped down a table. Even some of the newer staff, who hadn't been directly involved in the toxic culture, seemed unsure of how to react to the sudden shift in leadership. And then there were the customers. Some regulars had witnessed the dramatic confrontation earlier that morning. Others were just beginning to notice that something was different. The diner buzzed with quiet speculation. Sophia took a slow breath. Change wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was going to happen. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "All right, let's make one thing clear," she said, addressing the entire staff. "We're not doing things the old way anymore. That means every customer gets treated with the same respect, whether they're wearing a suit or coveralls. If you have a problem with that, you know where the door is." Emma scoffed but said nothing. Alex muttered something under his breath, but a sharp look from Sophia shut him up. She continued. "I'm not here to make anyone's life miserable. I'm here to make this place better. For everyone." She glanced around. "If you're willing to do your job right, I'll have your back. But if you think you can keep picking and choosing who deserves good service..." She folded her arms. "Then we're going to have a problem." A tense silence settled over the room. Then Mark, the former manager, stormed past, his face still red from humiliation. He threw a glare at Sophia on his way out, but she didn't flinch. He was gone. And she was still here. For the first time since she walked into this building 3 years ago, she belonged here. And no one was going to take that from her. The growing pains. The first week was brutal. Some employees quit immediately. A few just didn't show up for their shifts anymore. Sophia didn't chase after them. She wanted a fresh start, and that meant keeping only the people who actually wanted to work. She spent her first few days watching and listening. She paid attention to how orders were handled, how customers were treated, how the kitchen operated. And she noticed something troubling. The diner was losing customers. Not because of the change in leadership, but because of years of bad service. People had stopped coming in long before she became manager. Truckers who used to stop for breakfast had found other diners along their routes. Families who once gathered here for Sunday brunch had taken their business elsewhere. Because why would they return to a place where they felt unwelcome? Sophia tapped her pen against the clipboard, staring at the dwindling reservation list. She had fought so hard to get here. Now, she had to fight to keep it. A plan for change. Sophia wasn't the kind of leader to sit in the back office while problems piled up. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. First, she called a meeting. Not just with the staff, but with the customers. She personally reached out to some of the former regulars. Asked them why they stopped coming. Listened as they told her about rude waitstaff, forgotten orders, and a general feeling of being unwanted. It made her stomach turn. But it also gave her clarity. She knew exactly what needed to change. She updated the menu, bringing back some of the classic dishes that customers had loved. She introduced a new policy: any complaints about service would be taken seriously. No more favoritism. No more ignoring tables based on appearance. She hired new staff, people who actually wanted to be there. And slowly, things started to shift. Truckers returned, telling each other about the new Sunrise Diner. Families started coming back, noticing the friendlier atmosphere. Even the kitchen staff seemed happier. But not everyone was on board. Enemies in the ranks. Emma and Alex weren't going down without a fight. Sophia had expected resistance, but not this. Emma still refused to acknowledge her authority, taking every chance to undermine her. She would accidentally mess up orders. Conveniently forget to restock supplies. Make snide comments under her breath loud enough for Sophia to hear. Alex wasn't much better. He took twice as long to do simple tasks. Rolled his eyes whenever Sophia gave an instruction. And worst of all, he had started spreading rumors. Little things at first. That Sophia was on a power trip. That she was trying to ruin the diner. That she was only given this job out of pity. Sophia clenched her jaw as she overheard Alex whispering to another server near the drink station. She was done playing nice. "Alex," she called out. He froze. Turned, slowly. "Yeah?" She crossed her arms. "Do you want this job?" He scoffed. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one," she said. "Because if you don't, I can make this real easy for you." A tense pause. Then Alex let out a dry laugh. "Relax. I'm just..." "Just what?" she cut in. He had no answer. She stepped closer. "You've got two options, Alex. You do your job the right way, or you leave. But I won't tolerate this anymore." He swallowed. Looked around like he expected someone to back him up. But no one did. Even Emma looked away. Finally, he muttered something under his breath and grabbed a rag to wipe down a counter. Sophia exhaled. She wasn't going to let anyone tear this place down. Not when she had worked so hard to fix it. A diner reborn. Weeks passed. And with every shift, the diner grew busier. The tables were full again. The regulars had returned, and they weren't just coming back. They were bringing friends. The diner had always been a place. Now, it was a community. Sophia leaned against the counter, watching as a trucker laughed with the cook over the counter. As a little girl giggled while her dad cut up her pancakes. As a group of construction workers joked around with their waitress, who smiled genuinely back. She felt something swell in her chest. Pride. This was the diner she had always wanted it to be. And she had made it happen. Daniel Carter walked in, scanning the room with a knowing smirk. "You've done good work," he said, sliding into a stool at the counter. Sophia smiled. "Thanks." He nodded toward the packed restaurant. "How's it feel?" She glanced around. At the full tables. At the smiling faces. At the life that had returned to this place. She took a deep breath. And grinned. "Feels like home." Sophia wiped her hands on her apron, surveying the diner as the evening rush died down. The clinking of silverware, the hum of conversation, it all felt different now. Better. She moved toward the counter where Daniel was sipping his coffee, his eyes scanning the room. "Everything running the way you want it?" he asked, his voice calm but knowing. Sophia exhaled. "Not perfect yet, but we're getting there." Daniel smirked. "It's never perfect. But I'd say you're doing better than most." She let her gaze sweep across the diner. A few weeks ago, it had been suffocating. Now, it felt alive. But there was still work to do. A commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Emma was arguing with a customer, a woman in a worn-out coat, her hands gripping a tattered purse. The woman's voice was low but firm. Emma's was sharp, impatient. "I told you," Emma snapped, arms crossed, We don't do separate checks for orders under $10. If you didn't bring enough money, that's not my problem. Sophia's stomach twisted. Emma knew the rules had changed. Sophia strode toward the counter, her voice cutting through the tension. Is there a problem here? Emma turned, arms still folded. This lady didn't bring enough to cover her meal, and I told her. Sophia held up a hand, silencing her. Then she turned to the woman. Ma'am, what's the issue? The woman hesitated, her fingers tightening around the purse. I thought I had enough. I miscalculated. Sophia glanced at the check. It wasn't much. Maybe $5 short. Don't worry about it, Sophia said with a gentle smile. We've got it covered. Emma scoffed. You're seriously just giving food away now? Sophia turned slowly, leveling her gaze at Emma. You got a problem with that? Emma's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Good, Sophia continued, her voice even. Because if I ever catch you speaking to a customer like that again, you won't have a job here. Understood? Emma's face burned red. For a second, it looked like she might argue. But then she nodded stiffly and stormed off. Sophia sighed, turning back to the woman. Enjoy your meal, ma'am. The woman's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you. Really? Sophia just nodded and walked back toward the counter. Daniel watched the whole thing, amusement playing in his expression. You handle that well, he remarked. Sophia poured herself a cup of coffee. I handle it how it should have been handled in the first place. Daniel chuckled. You ever think about running your own place? She blinked. What? You've got the instincts for it, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. You don't just see what's in front of you, you see what it could be. Sophia shook her head with a short laugh. I think I have enough on my plate right now. Daniel just shrugged. Doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it. She stared down at her coffee, the steam curling into the air. Her own place. The idea planted itself in her mind, taking root. But for now, she had a diner to run. And plenty of work left to do. The evening shift wound down, and Sophia moved through the diner, refilling coffee cups, checking on tables, and making sure the kitchen was prepped for the next day. The place was running smoother now, more organized, more welcoming. But there were still cracks beneath the surface. She caught sight of Alex near the drink station, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate movements. Too slow. Alex, she called. He barely glanced up. What? She leaned against the counter. I need to know, are you actually planning on staying here, or are you just waiting for me to fire you? His hand stilled. He turned to face her, arms crossed. I do my job. Not very well, she shot back. He scowled. You've had it out for me since you got this job. Sophia let out a dry laugh. No, Alex, you had it out for me. I walked in here this morning and gave everyone a choice. You could have stepped up, but instead, you've been acting like a child. So, I'll ask again. Are you in, or are you out? He hesitated, shifting on his feet. I need this job. Then start acting like it. For the first time, something flickered in his expression, something like regret. Sophia didn't press further. She turned and walked away. Some people could change. But they had to want to. She wasn't going to waste her energy on those who didn't. She had bigger things to focus on. The diner needed to grow. And that meant bringing in new business. She spent the next few days planning. Updating menus, getting the kitchen staff involved in brainstorming specials, reaching out to local businesses to see if they could collaborate. Then she made a bold move. She called a local food critic. Sunrise Diner had never been reviewed before. It was just another roadside stop, another small-town eatery. But that was before. Now. It was something worth talking about. The day of the critic's visit, Sophia made sure every detail was perfect. The tables were spotless, the kitchen was running at top speed, and the staff, even Emma and Alex, were putting in their best effort. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. The critic, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Porter, arrived just before noon. She ordered the house special, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. The same dish Sophia had recommended to Daniel that night. She watched as Diane took the first bite. Then the second. Then the third. No reaction. No words. The wait felt endless. Finally, Diane set down her fork, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and nodded. Sophia's breath caught. "Well?" she asked, unable to hide the tension in her voice. Diane glanced up. "This place," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips, "might just be the best-kept secret in town." Sophia exhaled, her grip on the counter loosening. That night, she stayed late, going over the day's receipts, tallying numbers, planning for what came next. She could feel it. Sunrise Diner wasn't just surviving. It was becoming something. And for the first time, she let herself wonder. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she could run her own place someday. But for now, she had a diner to turn into something great. And she was just getting started. Weeks passed, and the diner thrived. The Food Critics Review had been published, and suddenly, Sunrise Diner wasn't just a local stop, it was a destination. New customers poured in, curious to see what made this small-town diner so special. Sophia worked tirelessly, ensuring that the standards never slipped. She trained new staff, reinforced the values of respect and fairness, and made sure that no customer was ever treated as less than. Emma eventually quit, storming out one afternoon after Sophia caught her ignoring a customer again. No one begged her to stay. Alex, surprisingly, changed. It wasn't immediate, but little by little, he stopped sulking and started working. One night, as Sophia was locking up, he hesitated before heading out. "You were right," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was being a jerk." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You're just realizing that now?" He let out a short laugh. "I guess I just didn't think this place could ever be different. But you proved me wrong." She smirked. "Get used to it." He chuckled and walked out. Sophia leaned against the counter, looking around the empty diner. The hum of the kitchen had quieted. The chairs were stacked. The place felt peaceful. And then her phone buzzed. "Daniel." She answered. "Hey. I have a proposal for you," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Another one?" "This one's bigger," he said. "Meet me tomorrow." The next morning, she walked into a downtown cafe, finding Daniel already seated, a folder in front of him. She sat down, eyeing him warily. "What's this about?" He slid the folder across the table. "That's a deed," he said. "To a new restaurant space. I bought it. And I want you to run it." Sophia's breath caught. "Wait. What?" "You've proven yourself, Sophia. You turned a dying diner into something people care about. You're ready for the next step." She stared at him, her mind racing. A restaurant. Her own restaurant. She had never dared to dream this big. But now she could. A slow smile spread across her lips. She reached for the folder. "Tell me more." And just like that, she stepped into a future she never saw coming. But one she had earned. The end.